Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to the show. Listen, I'm glad to have you guys here. Today is Sunday, the 5th of January, 2020. And we got an important show to do right now, and it's of vital importance. Uh, and the reason why it's important, well, let's get started. Let's open up the charts right here. And the first thing I want to take a look at is how much petroleum does the United States import and export? Now you're going to wonder, why is that important? You're going to find out. The United States in 2018, now you have to understand that the numbers haven't come in for 2019 yet because we've just ended the year. But the numbers in 2019 are even bigger than the numbers in 2018 of how much oil the United States exports. But the United States imports, that number hasn't changed that much. Some, but not as much as the export number. In 2018, the United States imported 9.4 million barrels per day. And that's what we use domestically, an awful lot of that oil. But the thing is as of 2019, we actually produce a bit more than we actually import in the United States. And what that means is, if we were to take all of that oil that we use every day, that we produce, and if we were to use it internally, well, then we would have enough oil. It says in 2018, the United States imports about 9.94 million barrels per day of petroleum from nearly 90 different countries. So the United States gets its oil from 90 different countries. A lot of that oil is brought in from OPEC, and they take that oil and they see it's petroleum products such as gasoline, diesel fuel, biofuels including ethanol and biodiesel, crude oil. Accounts for 78% of the United States gross petroleum imports in 2018, and non-crude oil petroleum accounted for 22% of gross petroleum imports in the United States. Now, what we have here is we have supply chains. And so the countries that are importing a lot of oil into America are Canada, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Venezuela, and Iraq. These countries are importing oil into the United States to satisfy United States consumer demand. In other words, to fill your car with gasoline. An awful lot of that oil comes from these oil-rich producing countries, including Canada. Canada produces a lot and sends into the United States. But the United States has a set amount of oil that it needs every day to run the country. Basically, to keep your gas stations open. You got an awful lot of oil has to come in. And there's supply chains set up that bring that oil into the United States. Now, the United States that export oil, the oil they export right now, which is a lot, they produce a lot of oil, but there's supply chains already in place. That oil's going out and flowing out into those supply chains. Let's take a look at something else here real quick, and this is a vitally important area in the world for oil production. There's a tiny little strait here. It's called a strait. It's where the river, not river, but the Persian Gulf narrows down as it goes into as it flows out through this tiny little crook here. Let's focus down in on this tiny little crook. Right here, in basically a crook in the river, like a little area where it narrows down. And this is an area of vital importance right here. And the reason why is because of Iran. This is why this is vitally important. What if that little crook in the bend in the river gets cut off? Well, how much oil comes through there that supplies the United States with crude oil for everything, your everyday use, your car, your gasoline, everything else? How much goes through that little area right there? That little area is called the Strait of Hormuz. And looked it up on the internet. How much oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz? How much oil and gas passes through? Around 1/6 of the world's oil moves through the strait. 17.2 million barrels per day moves through this strait. This includes most of the oil from the Organization of Petroleum Export Countries, OPEC. OPEC oil moves through there. Members include Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, and Kuwait. So that oil flows through that little narrow area right there. The problem with the idea that America produces enough oil for all of our uses in North America here is true. We do. Canada produces a lot of oil. The United States produces a lot of oil, and we used it all domestically and didn't sell it to anybody else, just kept it for ourselves, well, we would have enough oil. But the problem is we've been exporting it, giving it to other people, selling it to other people, shipping our oil out, and those export chains are already in place. Like dealers that sell oil from one company to another, they already got the supply chain in place to export that oil out of the country. The problem would be to use all of our oil for ourselves, we would have to change everything around, and that takes time. You just can't snap your fingers and say, okay, we're going to use all of our oil for ourselves now. We're going to cut off all these export chains that are already in place, and we're going to start refining our oil in our own country, and we're not going to ship it out anymore. You just can't suddenly say, okay, we're going to do that, and now keep all of our oil for ourselves and make it happen overnight. It's something that would take even if you put a rush on it, it would take 6 months, a year, 2 years to get into that change, to make that monumentous change, to use all of your oil for yourself so you'd be okay. But what would happen if suddenly the oil didn't come through the Strait of Hormuz anymore? Because 17.2 million barrels per day comes through the Strait of Hormuz. What if it couldn't come through the Strait of Hormuz? Well, then you'd have oil shock, where there would be a short supply of oil. Let's take the satellite imagery here and go right into the Strait of Hormuz. Whoop! Something went wrong while displaying this. Refresh the page and hope we can get it. Okay, here we go. Coming down the satellite imagery, you see this strait. Because I'm curious about it right here. I'm curious about what it actually looks like. It doesn't look like much, really, to tell you the truth. There's not a whole lot there other than ocean, isn't there? Anyway, it's this little this little area right here, the Strait of Hormuz. This is vital importance area, this choke point. I'm telling you guys, if it were to get cut off, what would it look like in America? What would it look like here in Canada? Well, first off, there'd be a huge increase in the price of oil. Oil price would go up astronomically high. But what I'm interested in is everything would be okay if you could buy it. In other words, say the price doubles. Yeah, we'd still be okay. People would be willing, instead of paying $20 to get some gas in their car, they'd be willing to pay $40. That wouldn't be the end of the world, you know. But what I'm seeing as a real problem is there just wouldn't be enough oil to go around. See, I remember what happened back in the 1970s when there was a shock and oil was cut off, you know. And there's big, long lineups to get oil, and there wasn't any oil at the gas pumps, you know. You go to the gas pumps and the tanks are empty. I remember that, where you couldn't buy it at any price. And I mean, how do you get to work, for crying out loud, you know? So this is where the problem is, and this is why I'm doing this show right now for you guys, is I see this as a huge problem, that if this were to get cut off or choked so that no oil comes out of the Persian Gulf anymore, that what it could create is, instead of having all the oil we need for each particular day, like, how many barrels we use. Let's go back and take a look per day. How many barrels does America use? The United States imports. United States imports. How much do they import here? It says United States exported and the United States imports about 9.94 million barrels per day, and there's 17 million barrels per day comes out through that area. So it would cut us back. We might be off maybe a couple million barrels per day that we don't have. So we import 9.94 million barrels per day, and say we're only able to get 7 million barrels per day. All of a sudden there would just be like the same thing that happened in the 1970s. That's the way I see it. There just wouldn't be any gas available at a lot of stations, and you'd have to wait for your gas to come in, and the tanks wouldn't get filled on time and all this kind of stuff. This is what I'm worried about. Thank you guys for listening to this show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. And, give me a thumbs up, guys. Bye-bye.